Okay friends, to do this job, we're going to have to drain the cooling system. The petcock for this, or the drain, is going to be located on the bottom, so you want to make sure that you have your vehicle in a position that you can get underneath it. After that, let's go ahead and make sure that the cooling system is nice and cool to the touch. We'll go ahead and turn this radiator cap counterclockwise and lift it up and away from our face. Set this aside. The next thing that we're going to do is come along here and we're going to remove the pair of these push clips. To do that, you just come in along this area. We're going to go ahead and lift up on the center. This one came out wrong. Let's try this one. Come right in along the center here. We're going to try to pry up on the center, and that's going to release the locking mechanism. Once that's popped up, you can lift it up. Next, let's go ahead and grab onto this. We'll give it a little wiggle and remove this from the vehicle. Now, there's a bunch of other things up along the top here that we're going to have to go ahead and remove, but before we go ahead and do that, let's get underneath the front of the vehicle and start draining this coolant. From underneath the front of the vehicle, we're going to go ahead and remove this plastic shield right here. You're going to find several push clips that you're going to want to pull out the centers on, and then you're also going to find some 10mm headed bolts that you're also going to have to remove. Now that we have all those out of there, let's go ahead and pull this down. Remove the shield from the vehicle. Now that the shield's out of the way, you have a nice clear view of the drain. This is also called the radiator petcock. So what we want to do is just put a little hose that comes off of the spout there, and we're going to bring this down to our coolant collection receptacle. After that, go ahead and turn this counterclockwise and let the coolant drain into that collection receptacle. Once that's finished draining, let's go ahead and close this off. There we are. I'll get my hose out of the way. All right, so now that we have that closed off, let's go ahead and grab onto this clamp for the lower radiator hose to the radiator. We'll grab this, we'll slide it up the hose, then we can remove the hose from the radiator itself. Now back up on top, we're going to come over to this area. Go ahead and squeeze on this clamp. We'll remove this hose. Sometimes there can be coolant inside this area. This thing off of here. Remove it from this area right there. Now we're going to set this aside, making sure that it's not going to drip out any coolant. Now we can remove our upper radiator hose from the radiator. Go ahead and squeeze on this clamp. Slide that down the hose. Break the hose free from the radiator. Remove the hose. The next thing we're going to do is remove our wiring from the fan assembly. You're going to find a whole bunch of anchor points that come across this. What you're going to want to do is just use a forky tool or whatever you might happen to have that can get in between this area to pop it apart. Now once you have all those anchor points off, we're going to disconnect them from the motors. Now that we have all those anchor points off, let's go ahead and disconnect the wiring from the motors. You're going to find a push tab right in the center. Go ahead and press on that, and then we'll lift this up. Every time you remove an electrical connector, just inspect it. If you see any funny colors, it's corrosion and it needs to be dealt with. That one looks fine, so we'll set it aside and move along. We'll do the same to this one right here. Go ahead and press in on that tab, lift it up, inspect it, set it aside. Next, we can remove our two 10mm headed bolts that hold the fan assembly to the radiator. Let's go ahead and grab onto this fan assembly here. We're going to lift it straight up, tilt it a little bit here, and get it up and out of the vehicle. Next, we're going to start removing the brackets that hold the radiator in here. What you're going to notice is this bracket right here has the bolt covered by this area. Let's go ahead and remove the center aspect of this push pin. Get that nice and loose. We can lift this up. We'll lift that up, remove the outer portion as well. And now we can just lift this up and we have a nice clear view of our 10mm headed bolt right there. We can pull this back, remove that 10mm headed bolt. Remove this bracket. Do the same to this one. Alright, now we can grab onto that radiator. We're going to lift it straight up and out of here. There it is, friends. With the radiator out of the way, the next area that we want to pay attention to is down in here. These right here can technically pop up and out of there sometimes, so you want to ensure that they're definitely in there. That's the lower mount for the radiator. Once you're sure they're both in there, go ahead and add a little bit of lubricant. And now we can grab that brand new radiator. Here we go, time to install that brand new radiator. Go ahead and carefully slide it down in here, being very careful not to damage any of your fins while you bring this down. Now we're going to line up those bottom tabs of the radiator with those bottom areas down here that we added the lubricant to. Slide it right down in there. Make sure it's nice and secure. Just grab onto the lower aspect, give it a little wiggle. If it falls out of one of these, you know it's not in there securely. Just put a little bit of lubricant along these top pins right here on the radiator. And then we can take our brackets, we'll slide them on there, start in both bolts, and then snug them up. There we are. There we are. We want to make sure that these are tight and they're not crooked in any way. You don't want your radiator slid off to one side or the other. Let's put in the outer portion of our push pin, lock it in with the center. Now it's time to go ahead and put in the fan. For this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it kind of at this angle here. We'll grab that wiring, pull it towards the engine, and then carefully slide it in. As we're sliding this in, you want to be very careful not to get caught on your wires and give them a tug or damage your radiator in any way. It's like watching paint dry. Alright, so now that we have this down here, we're going to continue on by trying to line these up a little bit. And once those are lined up, generally the lower aspect will be lined up as well. Now we can start bolting in the fan here. Snug it up. Now we can start plugging this in. Listen for a click, give it a tug. Let's go ahead and get this secured in right along here. We'll do the same on this one. Connect that in as well, wherever it goes. Okay. Now we're going to start securing the rest of the wiring coming across. Let's get this back on here. We're just going to slide it right in. Make sure that's nice and secure. You don't want it flopping around. We'll get this onto the radiator. Squeeze that clamp, slide it down. Now we can move along to the upper radiator hose. You want to bottom this out right up against the radiator right there. Put the clamp on there, make sure it's secure. Looking at the hose, you can tell exactly where the clamp was originally. That's where you're going to want to put the clamp when you put it back on. Same exact position. Now we can get back underneath the vehicle and we're going to go ahead and make sure that our petcock is nice and tight. You don't want to have this leaking on you while you're driving down the road. After that, let's come over here to the lower radiator hose. We'll go ahead and slide this right onto the radiator, slide it on as far as it can. Double check to make sure it's bottomed out against that radiator there. Super important, you don't want this sliding off. After that, slide your clamp on there and make sure it's secure. Slide this on here. We want to get this clamp so it's in the exact same position as it was when we originally took it off. Now we can start putting this shield back up on here. Just get this lined up. I'm going to go across and start in all of my mounting bolts, and then I'll do all my push pins, and then we can snug these up. Now we can start putting our push clips up in here. Back up top, we can go ahead and put on this air duct here. It's going to slide right into that square that you can see down in the corner. We'll just get it lined up, press it in there, listen for a clip. Now we're going to come right over here and we're going to try to line up both of our holes. We can put in both of our push clips and lock them in. Now it's going to be time to go ahead and fill up our cooling system. Commonly, people are just going to use a funnel that looks like this. You can use one of the adapters that comes with it, put it on there, and that's going to help ensure that you can burp out any of the air that's in the system while not making a mess. I have a tool that's meant for professionals, so that's what I'm going to use. It's a little bit easier for me. Now, generally after I use my specialized tool, I always revert back to the funnel because I always want to make sure that I bleed out any air that might be potentially inside the system so that we're sure that it's completely full with only the manufacturer's specified coolant. Now what I would do here is just make sure that I have a little bit of coolant inside the funnel here, and then I would just go ahead and start up the vehicle. I'm going to let it run for a while. I want to make sure that I have the internal temperature climate set to high or hot. I also want to make sure that I keep running the vehicle until my cooling fans turn on. Once they turn on and I see no more air bubbles inside this right here, I know that I'm good to go. I can go ahead and pinch it off, and then I'll go ahead and recycle this fluid that's left over. Now it's time to go ahead and put on our radiator cap. Let's line up the tabs with the radiator. Turn it clockwise, make sure it's completely sealed. After this, it's a good idea to go ahead and go for a road test. While you're on your road test, make sure you watch that thermostat on the inside gauge cluster there and make sure that you stay in the normal range.